Mom asked about my college graduation. When I said I dropped out freshman year, she spit out her wine. The red wine sprayed across the white tablecloth like a crime scene. What do you mean you dropped out freshman year? Mom gasped between coughs. You've been gone for 4 years? We've been paying tuition for 4 years. You're supposed to graduate next month. I'd been dreading this moment for 3.5 years. Every family dinner, every phone call, every holiday visit had been an elaborate performance. When they asked about my classes, I'd mention generic topics from YouTube lectures. When they wondered about professors, I'd invent names and personalities. When they sent care packages to my dorm, I'd drive to campus just to pick them up and maintain the illusion. The truth was more complicated than simple academic failure. I'd lasted exactly 6 weeks at State University before my anxiety became unbearable. Panic attacks during lectures, throwing up before every exam, staying awake for days convinced I was too stupid to be there. When I finally worked up the courage to call the suicide hotline, the counselor gently suggested maybe college wasn't the right path for everyone, but telling my parents wasn't an option. Dad had worked double shifts at the factory for 18 years to save for my education. Mom had taken night classes herself to finish her degree at 45, just to prove college was possible for our family. They'd thrown a party when I got accepted, invited the entire neighborhood, printed my acceptance letter, and hung it on the refrigerator like a trophy. So instead of dropping out officially, I'd created an elaborate fiction. I rented a studio apartment near campus with the tuition money, got a job at a coffee shop, then a bookstore, eventually working my way up to assistant manager. I'd been supporting myself for years, building a decent life, but living in constant terror of discovery. Where has the tuition money been going? Dad's voice was dangerously quiet. I could see him calculating numbers in his head, the thousands of dollars they'd scraped together each semester. We've sent you $15,000 this year alone. Where is it? That's when I had to explain the apartment, the jobs, the careful construction of my fake student life. Mom's face cycled through confusion, betrayal, and something approaching horror. You've been lying to us for almost 4 years. Every phone call, every visit home, every conversation about your future has been a complete fabrication. The worst part was explaining why I'd chosen deception over honesty. I couldn't disappoint you, I whispered, watching Mom dab wine stains with trembling hands. You've sacrificed everything for my education. Dad works 70-hour weeks. You went back to school at 45. How was I supposed to tell you that I was too weak to handle what you both managed just fine? Dad sat down heavily, suddenly looking every one of his 58 years. So what have you been doing all this time? Just working retail and lying to your family? When I explained about the bookstore, how I'd become assistant manager, how I was learning business operations and thinking about starting my own shop someday, his expression didn't soften. You threw away a college education to work at a bookstore, Mom said flatly. Do you have any idea what we've sacrificed? I've been eating ramen noodles for dinner so we could afford your meal plan. Your father hasn't bought new work boots in 2 years because every extra dollar went to your tuition. The conversation got worse when they realized the implications. No degree meant no graduation ceremony they'd been planning to attend, no career prospects they could brag about to neighbors, no return on the investment they'd made in my future. I'd stolen their dreams along with their money, but then something unexpected happened. Dad asked about my job responsibilities, and as I described managing inventory, training new employees, and handling customer relations, his expression began to change. When I mentioned the business plan I'd been developing for my own bookstore, Mom leaned forward with interest, despite herself. You've been supporting yourself completely for 3 years? Dad asked slowly. Paying rent, utilities, groceries, everything on a retail salary? When I nodded, he exchanged a look with Mom. That's more than most college graduates can manage right out of school. The evening ended with careful conversations about my actual future, rather than the fictional one I'd been constructing. Mom was still hurt about the deception, but she was also impressed that I'd built a stable life independently. Dad admitted that practical business experience might be worth more than a degree I'd earned while miserable. 6 months later, they co-signed a loan for my bookstore. The grand opening banner read, Dreams Books and Coffee, owned by college dropout turned entrepreneur. Mom hung my business license on the refrigerator where my fake acceptance letter used to be.